There is nothing quite like the feeling of getting an outright gift from the gods of gambling. Welcome to today's edition of Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to be with you. NoFilter.net and our various other platforms that carry the show. We're going to dive into some college football with a guy that is on a bit of an unfortunate streak where we're assuming he's going to turn it around. The professor is going to join us here and take a look at some of the college action that's on tap for the weekend, including the marquee game. He actually has a play in that one, an opinion on that, where you have Georgia, number 5 in the country, going on the road and facing Texas and getting what many people think is a somewhat robust 5 to 5.5 points in that game. So a lot of action to decipher. We have a few games on tap tonight on the college football slate. Had a dynamite baseball game last night. You couldn't have asked for much more, as you got the back-to-back dramatic home runs from Judge and Stanton. Yankees look like they're in a position to take a commanding 3-0 lead over the Cleveland Guardians and just eliminate them pretty much from consideration for making it all the way to the big dance, the fall classic, as Tommy Lasorda used to call it. And next thing you know, they get a tying 2-run home run. The Guardians do in the bottom of the ninth inning with 2 away, and end up winning the ball game in 10 on a home run by Fry. So that was great stuff. The Mets fall into a very compromising spot as they are down now 3-1 to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Before we get into college football with the professor, if you are making any wagers over the weekend, the place to go is Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform. Your number one source for anything when it comes to sports betting. Every stat, every matchup, breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on while the games are in progress. I had a premonition last night. I didn't act on this, of course, because it's the bets you don't make. It's the chances you don't take that usually ruin your betting endeavors. But I did think that Judge might be good for the home run, as the Guardians went to their closer, Class A, and he was anything but that, as Judge knocked one out into the right center field seats, and the game was tied up at 3 apiece before the Yankees took the lead. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA, to political props, when the game's over, you can head on over to the online casino. You can play poker. You can play blackjack. You can get involved in over 150 slot games. Head to the website today. Get in on all the action with America's most trusted site. That's Bet Online, where the game starts here. All right. It's been a little difficult of late. The professor joins us here on the show. And of course, the weekend tipped off with, I hope, what is not an ominous sign, as I know you had an interest from our discussions before this show, the game last night between Boston College and Virginia Tech. So I'm bouncing back and forth, Professor, between the two baseball games and sensational action. And I'm thinking, hey, let me see how the professor's Boston College bet is going. So I turn on ESPN, and they're down. They're getting 7.5. They're down 14, but they're inside, I think, the 10-yard line, somewhere around the 5 or 6-yard line. And I got a guy wide open, breaks wide open on second down and goal. The pass floats over his head, and so that would turn out no good. But you're thinking, just a touchdown here. We get within 7. There's little incentive for Virginia Tech to really pour it on. They're in a position there where they could run some clock. And we're in a favorable spot. And sure enough, the next pass goes awry. And after that, they botched a field goal attempt, which I wasn't really happy about them taking that chance at that point anyway, because they still would have been down 11 points. And the next play from scrimmage, we see Virginia Tech go all the way for a touchdown on a running play that looked like a simple dive into the line of scrimmage. And that's the way it goes when things aren't going well. But how are you holding up under all of this? And I'm hoping you're offsetting some of these public plays that you've been making with some scores on some of the other games that you're betting on. How are you, Mike?
First of all, thanks for reliving that play-by-play, Deef. I really hoping to do that this morning. No. I will take a few. For example, we did have a winner on Western Kentucky Wednesday night. So yes, there's a couple things that don't show up on the radio, but generally, I'm living it with the public. If you hear me say it, I'm playing it, and it is not going well.
Yeah,
Fortunately, okay. And on this show, we know because we've been doing it since the start of the season. We really did get off to a good start.
yes.
The first 4 or 5 weeks, whatever it was of the season. So believe it or not, folks who are watching that other stupid show you started, that I'm just destroying everybody. We actually are having a winning season, but it has gone from, I think we were up 9 units to we are now up 2 units over the
Right.
last after the last disasters of the last 2 weeks.
Well, if you
So
can,
overall, it's not bad. Hoping for a turnaround, but yeah, I mean the last 2 weeks have been rough, man.
if you can lose that many in a row and still be ahead, you're in pretty good shape, which is great.
I
And
think
I
I
don't.
am personally funding those Post Malone commercials that the Hard Rock is running.
Yeah, you never see guys losing. You never see them jump out of the limousine and just lay face down in the gutter for a couple of days.
Honestly, unfortunately, that has spread throughout like the whole internet. Like everybody does the Floyd Mayweather things. Like, here's my winning ticket. I've won 57 in a row or whatever. No, you didn't, you asshole. Like nobody does that.
Yeah, we always reference the fact that the lights are on 24 hours a day in Las Vegas, and it's happened for a reason. And that the only guy that could lose money in the casino business would be presidential candidate Donald Trump, who was notorious for bankrupting various businesses, even though he's supposed to be this stellar businessman. I mentioned the gift from the gods of gambling, which is a rarity, but I thought, and I said this on a show yesterday, that unless there was some kind of occult intervention, some gypsy was sticking a needle in the eyeball of a Sean Payton voodoo doll in Jackson Square, how on earth could you possibly bet on the Saints getting only 2.5
I
against the
mean,
Denver
there was
Broncos?
somebody. I mean, I'm not. There was somebody who did it. I have a very tough time coming up with an opinion one way or the other with these Thursday night NFL games. I I I know there's a very strong home field bias involved in those games. So I imagine if you did it was probably based on that because 4 days rest combined with a road game is not an easy task, no matter how much of an advantage you think you have coming in.
Yeah, but that being said, what we saw where you have a backup quarterback, I guess Carr was listed as doubtful, but we know this for a fact on the NFL injury reports that unless somebody's listed as deceased, there is that likelihood that he's going to play. It didn't seem that way with Derek Carr. So they got a rookie quarterback in there, a backup on top of that. No wide receivers. Their two top guys were injured. And they open up in a wing T formation. And I thought that this is not a good sign for those that thought that this was going to be a
Well, you
close
know what
game.
the logic probably there was?
What was that?
This is actually a very famous story. During the year that he was suspended as coach for the New Orleans Saints,
Yes.
Sean Payton coached his son's little league team, his Pee Wee League team. And the one team that not only beat him, and if you've seen the Kevin James movie, not only beat him, beat the shit out of him twice, ran the wing T. And after the first one, Peyton famously called like all his NFL coaches and was like, "Has anybody ever coached the wing T?" He's like, "I've heard of this offense historically, but and so he called like the Ryan brothers and a bunch of other people. And they were like, "No, I'm in the NFL my whole life. I've never coached against it." And finally, he went. It was Bill Cowher who had, at some point during NC State, during his days at North Carolina State, had coached against the wing T offense. I assume some FCS school or whatever, and gave him a couple of tips on it. And he went out the next time and got buried again. So maybe that was the Saints' thinking, was like, well, we know Peyton can't defend the fucking wing T from that Kevin James movie that he did. So let's come out and honestly, it would be the kind of interesting twist that I really often advocate with these situations where like you don't have a good backup. Like, come out and run the option. Just see what the fuck happens. I mean, that one time it worked for the Dolphins, and it was against coaching super genius Bill Belichick, who had clearly never watched film on the Wildcat prior to that game and ate them alive. I would like NFL teams to take more chances like that, honestly.
Well, there's no chance, in my opinion, that the Saints were going to be able to cover the 2.5 points against the Denver Broncos, who have been a decent team under Sean Payton. They started out slowly. It's not like they have any dynamic offense. They changed quarterbacks and are starting Bo Nix, who was questionable in terms of his productivity coming into this game, but he naturally improved. And 33-10 was a pretty easy payoff. It was kind of like, as we were saying earlier on another show, where you've just reached puberty and then there's a knock on your door, and it's three naked strippers that say, "Hey, Jeff, you mind if we come in?" And you're saying,
That
"Thank
has
you,
never
God."
happened to me. Perhaps I have not lived in the right apartment building because I've never had that experience. Anytime some random neighbor has knocked on my door, it's either someone to complain about that.
Yeah, they were usually telling you, "Hey, could you
only,
stop that dog from
I'm gonna
barking?"
be honest. The only time a semi-dressed woman has, when I lived in a condo complex, the only time a semi-dressed woman has ever shown up at my door, it was some old lady in pajamas who was like, "I've caught a mouse under a pan in my apartment, but I can't kill it. Will you come kill this mouse for me?"
Not as
No,
enhancing,
no,
or
it was not
promising of an offer.
the
That's for
porn
sure.
scenario at all.
All right, let's get into some
Never once
college
have
football. Yeah.
strippers coming. Hey Jeff, we need to knock this 8 ball off today. Would you come help us out?
That was, and they come with P. Diddy's box full of baby oil as well to go along with it. But I felt like I was getting that kind of pleasure last night with Denver only laying 2.5 on the road against a very, you can't be more compromised than the Saints were in this ball game last night offensively. The surprising thing was that the game went over because the Saints were able to put 10 points on the board, while giving up 33. And the
Well, I
over-under
mean,
total was
as a
37.
Miami Dolphins fan who watched that Skylar Thompson start, I will say you can, in fact, be more compromised, but not by much.
All right, that was the NFL's gift to start out the week, and that continued a streak. Speaking of streaks, where home dogs have lost, I believe, now 10 in a row in the National Football League. And of course, we talked about this throughout the week. This was a burial. They were spreading the ashes of bookmakers all over the streets of Las Vegas last week with the NFL, with a gagging sea, a milk of magnesia-esque sea of chalk that was prevailing. So those that play the favorites and are inclined to lay the points continue to have success last night with a home dog going down in flames to the Denver Broncos. All right, let's look at the college slate. We already had action last night. We mentioned that. Sorry to have touched on that to start the show on
Yeah, it's
somewhat
not
of
a
a
good.
negative note.
It
But
wasn't
we're
on this
very
show.
straightforward here on Bury Your Bookie, and if we're getting buried, that's okay. We'll admit to that. But I do feel it's a streak that's going to change, and we hope abruptly this week. So you have a play on one of the games, and there are 4 games being offered on the slate tonight, and you're looking at BYU and Oklahoma State.
I am Oklahoma State getting. I'm showing 9. It was 9.5 or 10, depending where you looked yesterday. So it's trending down a little bit. But like the Cowboys in the points here again, BYU off to a very strong start, but I have my doubts. I mean, when you're looking at what BYU really is, I kind of focus in on that SMU game where they are overall a good football team, but they do not throw the ball nearly as well as they have in the past, and that really haven't gotten into a shootout situation where they're going to need that passing game yet because their defense has been very stout. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's tonight because we know Oklahoma State can score points. So again, Cowboys very solid as road dogs over the years. Mike Gundy much better as a road dog than in some favorite situations against the spread where they are less than reliable. Particularly when you're talking about games north of a touchdown, they're not necessarily a great cover team as a favorite. They are a great team as a cover team as road dogs on spreads north of a touchdown here. So, like Oklahoma State in this spot, look for their offense to get back on track. Again, historically speaking, Oklahoma State under Gundy better in the second half of the season, which starts tonight, than they have been in the first half. I think that Oklahoma State has an excellent chance to get back on track. I'm not calling for it. If you get north of a touchdown, absolutely take it. But I would not be stunned if they walk away with a straight up win here. I think BYU kind of a little bit overrated at this point in the season. Not in terms of accomplishments, they're rated properly there, but in terms of what they are as a team, don't know that they've been that significantly tested. And I think Oklahoma State will come and give them their best shot tonight. We like the Cowboys plus the 9.
All right, Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy getting 9 points from BYU, and Professor thinking that there's a shot there. They may even be a good money line play, so maybe a little taste on that, and definitely take the plus 9 with Oklahoma State, the Professor's first recommendation. Now, this game, there's been a lot of division on among the handicappers I've spoken to this week, and
Okay.
guys that we've had on the show. It seems like it's a split decision so far. Indiana and Nebraska. Nebraska appears to be a team that was maybe a little more tested than Indiana. Indiana's been scoring a ton of points, and they've covered a lot of spreads, even a fat one a couple of weeks ago. I think they were laying 14 and a half, managed to cover that pretty easily. But you have a lean, which I think this is the slight edge that we've had in terms of an overall consensus of the people we've talked to. But you like Nebraska in this spot, plus 6.5.
I do. Now, if this were a pick'em game, I wouldn't want anything to do with it, to be honest. But Indiana, number one, laying 6.5 is a home favorite. Indiana's home field bias not particularly strong over the years. Now, let's be honest, it's because overall Indiana's had rotten football teams for 58 of the last 60 years. So there's no reason that they should have a strong home field historical bias. I just think this number's a little bit north of where it should be. I would make this more like just over a field goal game than a 6.5, nearly a touchdown game. Again, you mentioned it, Indiana. It's one of two things. Either you believe this is one of the most dynamic offense. This is literally one of the most dynamic offenses in the country. It's one of the best offensive football teams in the country. Or you say their results are biased from a weak schedule. I lean towards their results are biased because they haven't played anybody to this point in the season. Best win probably over Maryland, who's 3-3. They also beat Northwestern a couple of weeks ago, who's 3-3. Both games, though, if you look at it, Indiana had to score late. They scored 2 late touchdowns against Northwestern to pull away in that one. Maryland, they scored, I want to say, yeah, it was with 3 minutes left to put that game on ice. Again, they've been a solid offensive football team against very questionable competition. But when you look at the margins, yes, they've covered games, but they've done so late against competition that's not that good. I happen to think Nebraska's a good team. I don't think they're, a playoff team necessarily, but I do think they should be ranked at this point. I'm not sure why they're not. I think they got tagged a little too hard for that home overtime loss to Illinois a couple weeks ago. I think at 5-1, the Huskers are a very solid team, and really, their defensive line at times this season has looked like an elite unit. I think they will manage to take away the Indiana running game, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Indiana when they don't have a balanced attack. They have had the luxury of that all season long, averaging more than 300 yards, 318, I believe, passing, and 200 yards a game even as rushing. When you have that kind of balance, offensive football can get very, very easy. I don't think they'll have it in this game. I think they'll struggle to run the ball against Nebraska, and we'll see what their passing game is made of. On the other side of the football, I like the way Dylan Raiola has looked in his 2 primetime games. Now, against Colorado, sure, he had the better side of it talent-wise, but it was a primetime game, a debut for a freshman on national TV, and he killed it. He also played very well in that game against Illinois. The team overall just couldn't get stops on defense to do him any favors in that football game, and his offensive line started to get him sacked in the fourth quarter. I think he will perform very well against Indiana, and I actually expect this to be a very tight game. Wouldn't be surprised at all if Nebraska wins straight up once again. But when you get 6.5 in a game that you're making like a field goal game either way, absolutely take the points. Cornhuskers plus 6.5 hook here. Again,
Yeah.
we've seen this over and over again in college football. Teams get into the season. They look super impressive, but they are untested by quality competition. And, if you're the University of Miami, you win anyway, but you really struggle with it. I think we're going to see that with Indiana this weekend.
All right, I wanted to touch on that game also against Louisville as not one of your official plays, but just get an opinion. I know you're a diehard fan, and of course we're here in South Florida, so we get all of the talk and the conversation about whether or not they're worthy of being ranked as highly as they are, and they really faced nothing yet. I think their toughest test was getting onto the field for the second half when they played FAMU and getting the band off the field there, because you know how tough those guys are when they had to go through the paddling on the school bus, some fat tuba player getting his ass whacked with an oar as they went through the gauntlet there. It was almost like having Dan Campbell running an Oklahoma drill. All right, and the marquee game, you usually stay out of some of these marquee games. That's one of the things that we always admire about you, because you'll find spots where you can win more so than just saying, hey, let me give out a total or a pick aside on a game that everybody in the country is paying attention to. But you're looking at the number one marquee game on maybe of the season so far. I guess Alabama Georgia was that a couple of weeks ago, but Georgia and Texas now has taken that spot with number five Georgia against the number one team in the country. And I think you're inclined to believe that maybe five is a little much to give
I think
Kirby Smart.
5 is a little much, but mostly this is just a feeling. But we're watching that game last week with Texas and Oklahoma, the Red River Shootout. I thought Quinn Ewers looked a little gun shy in that game last week. I don't think it was because Texas was trying to hold back the horses against Oklahoma. I mean, if you watch the antics both before and after the game, clearly Texas wanted to rub Oklahoma's nose in it as absolutely as much as they could. But you look at the way Ewers played, they didn't get vertical in the passing game at all. Only had 199 yards on 20 completions. I think it was 20 to 29. Ball was coming out of his hands a lot faster than normal. I wonder if he's fully healthy and if he's worried about taking shots after taking that injury a couple of weeks ago. Missed a couple of games. And you play the Georgia defense, you're going to get hit. So I wonder if Ewers is in fact 100%. I wonder if the Texas offense is going to function the way it's supposed to. Look, we know Sark, from his days at Alabama, his days at USC and Washington before that. This is a guy who does not, run a lot of quick out stuff. He is a guy who wants to get vertical in the passing game, and Texas just was not doing that against Oklahoma. So I see no reason why that would be the case against Georgia. And when you start playing that horizontal game against Georgia and let their team speed on defense, overtake the game, you're in Georgia's happy zone defensively right there. They don't want to be tested on the edges of the front seven. I don't think Texas will do that, particularly with Ewers. They don't like running quarterbacks, which has always been a problem for Nick Saban defenses. Kirby Smart, obviously, basically Nick Saban defensive philosophy to the numbers. Again, Texas isn't going to do that with Quinn Ewers playing quarterback. He is not a running quarterback. He is as true a pocket passer, really, as you'll find. I think the key for Georgia in this one, and I think they're going to win the ball game if they can avoid that slow offensive start that has sort of plagued them the whole time. Carson Beck has been their quarterback. That has been their issue. They do not get off to great starts offensively. If they can come out and do that this week, maybe get the running game involved a little bit early, or their defense can just keep it an even game until that offense gets on track, I would not be surprised to see Georgia win this football game. Again, think the line's just a little too big here. I know Texas at home, so they're going to be favored. I would probably have them at like 2.5 or 3. I certainly wouldn't have them at 5. And I think, again, just matchup wise, I would be very nervous about Quinn Ewers if I were a Texas fan headed into this one. I do not think he looked like himself last week at all.
All right, I almost feel like I'm back at the old Biscayne Kennel Club, and the dogs are in a box, and the rabbit's about to go around. 3 dogs given out by the professor here.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, one piece, and so you have a feeling. So, or takes it out.
3 dogs.
Like that was honestly, you have never seen a happier group of sports fans than dog track people after a dog takes a dump. Like that. That was. It was like
it was one of the keys. Dog body language.
And Hanukkah and Kwanzaa all rolled into one. It took a dump. Everybody run to the windows.
Especially when the heaviest dog in the race took a dump when there was a sloppy track. That was always a good omen. So Oklahoma State +9, and Nebraska +6 in a hook, and Georgia getting 5 in the marquee game against Texas. You mentioned Alabama, and last week I think the Tuscaloosa fans. It was a home game for Alabama against South Carolina, and they almost treated the Nick Saban statue like it was Saddam Hussein, where they were ready to just topple the thing over. DeBoer comes in, not an easy spot. You're following in the shoes of a guy that just accomplished legendary achievements there at Alabama.
Has a statue in front of the stadium.
And has the statue in front of the stadium, although now maybe a little bit suspect in terms of its status. But Alabama takes on Tennessee. So aside from your official plays, any thoughts on what happens there? Alabama laying points on the road.
I mean, honestly, if you're going to gun to my head, I would probably take the under because both offenses really look like they're struggling right at the moment, and obviously 2 stout defenses historically. With both these schools, Tennessee's defensive line is obviously an excellent unit. Total of 50. Yeah, honestly, I'm not putting out as an official play, but I didn't know the total was this high. 56.5. Under looks pretty solid to me in that particular matchup.
All right, and I know you're a big fan, as I mentioned. I spent many years affiliated with the program in various media assignments, coaches shows, and pregame, postgame shows, calling games, so I have a spot in my heart for the Hurricanes. Mario Cristobal was actually a player during that period of time, but we always say on Bury Your Bookie, at any time that we're assessing their chances in a game, you have to take into account as a major factor the Cristobal factor,
You
and
do.
that is that he can fuck up anything in terms of game day coaching. They
I
haven't
mean,
always had,
honestly,
yeah,
very similar to a hurricane, a celebrated hurricane coach, Butch Davis, in that
yes,
there
same
might
thing,
not be a better program building coach in the country. He might be as good as anybody in the country at building programs, and he might be in the bottom 10 game day coaches of anybody in the country, which is also very true of Butch. He's a fantastic recruiter, a fantastic team builder, and a garbage game day coach in terms of adjustments and close call decisions. Same thing with Mario. You have to factor it into any game because now supposedly they have given his friend the little offensive line coach, who's that's still the funniest thing I've ever seen. An offensive line coach who's like 5'5" and 140 pounds.
yeah.
They've
It's
given
like he's getting into the ring to be in one of those midget wrestling matches from the
supposedly
past.
after that disaster last year against Georgia Tech, they have now given him the responsibility of being the double check Mario's decisions on fourth down situations. So maybe that's an improvement. But again, yes, you have to factor that is Mario going to screw it up? Factor into every Hurricanes game.
Would you lay the 5 against Louisville, who everybody thought that this was going to be the Hurricanes' toughest matchup coming in? I guess it is, considering they haven't played much in the way of quality, and yet have still staggered around there in their last 3 ball games, all victories. But 2 of which could have easily been reversed and gone the other way against Virginia Tech on a very questionable Zapruder film type replay that they prevailed in. And then a non-call on what looked like a clear targeting call against Mendoza, a South Florida kid that Cristobal knew very well. And yet that call wasn't made, and that allowed the Hurricanes to get the ball back and engineer that 93-yard scoring drive that ultimately took them over the top. But would you go ahead and lay the 5 with the Hurricanes, or be inclined to take the points with Louisville at home?
Okay, I would say a couple of things. Number one, this game will 110% be about which Miami defensive line shows up. If the defensive line through the first 4 games shows up, Miami's going to win this game comfortably. If the defensive line from the Virginia Tech and the Cal game show up, it's going to go again probably to the final possession, and whoever scores last is going to win the football game, and it'll probably be in the final 2 minutes, just like the VT and the Cal games. I have no idea which that's going to be. My inclination, and again, not playing it myself, my inclination is I think the bye week for Miami headed into this one, as opposed to Louisville, who comes off 3 absolute wars against Notre Dame, SMU, and then Virginia. I think that bye week is going to show up huge for Miami. I think they'll be a fresher, rested team, and I think they will probably have some of that relief where they got 2 life and death scares and got away with both of them. I think mentally they will probably be in a better place than Louisville, who has lost 2 of their last 3 games, and then went to the wire with Virginia last week. So my guess is yes, I would lay the points, but I personally wouldn't play it again. This game will be entirely about which Miami front 7 unit shows up. If it's the one from the Florida game, if it's the one from particularly the second half of the USF game, Miami will win comfortably. If it's the defensive line we've seen the last couple times Miami was out, gonna go, right to the wire again, and Miami will probably need, Cam Ward to continue to walk on water to win this game.
All right, Professor, always good stuff. We hope the streak is snapped here. Official plays here: Oklahoma State tonight, getting 9 against BYU. Nebraska plus 6.5 against Indiana tomorrow. And then Georgia in the big one, getting the 5 points as they take on Texas, the number 1 team in the country, on the road. Have a great weekend, my friend. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you again next week here on
You
Bury
have
Your
a great
Bookie.
one, Deef. By the way, can I ask a question, Deef? Because I'm just looking at it.
Sure.
Are you wearing a Jacksonville Jaguars shirt? Because that looks like Jacksonville Jaguars colors to me.
No, I'm wearing the only clean shirt I found in my
Oh, okay.
closet.
I was going to ask, why the hell do you have a Jacksonville Jaguars shirt?
Well, because
And
I
why
love
would you own
Jacksonville in
that?
this game in London. It was part
Okay.
of my 2-team parlay that we gave out the other day.
Well, then go Jags.
And yeah, we loved the Denver Broncos in that spot last night. And then I think Jacksonville has a huge edge in sitting in London and eating shepherd's
Actually,
pie
so
and
do I.
drinking warm
And the
Guinness
fact that
all
they
week.
play there every year now.
Yes,
So,
and
yeah.
just played last week. And then you have a Patriot team that I think should automatically get 10 points over whatever the line is in the game before you make a wager.
And let's be honest, you also, if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, don't have to be in the city of Jacksonville, which, and
Yes,
like,
which is something
honestly,
they desire. Yeah.
Jacksonville could play games in Beirut and it would be an improvement over having to play in Jacksonville having to live in Jacksonville for,
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, they've been trying to escape there forever, and that's why they play all these games willingly in London when every other team thinks
exactly.
it's a disaster. But sitting there for a week, I think, has to give them the equivalent of a monumental
I
home field
sort of thought
advantage in this
you felt
game.
that way, which is why I asked about the shirt. So you can
Yeah,
just
and
say it.
I'm
It's Jags
surprised.
colors, go Jags.
I'm surprised the Patriots don't get at least a touchdown in every game that they play because they've been horrible, and that's been a gift, another gift from the gambling gods. So I think that spreads alarmingly low, and I don't suspect that it's one of those things where the wise guys are onto something with the Pats this week, as they're playing Drake May now at quarterback instead of Brissett. And Jacksonville is due to shake off the abysmal play that they've had and at least be representative
Well,
of
I
what
mean,
we thought they might be.
after last week, I think the wise guys have to be doubting themselves in anything NFL because
Yes.
I'm not sure we've ever seen a week in the NFL where the sheep ate the wolves ever. Did any favorite not cover? Did every favorite on the board win last week? Or if not, it
uh,
was only like one game or something like that.
Yeah, it might have been one game, and that was it. The bookies were diving off the tower of the stratosphere last week in Las Vegas, but they have little to cry about. They've been burying us for a long time, so
Exactly.
it's about time we reverse the trend. Professor, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us this week on Bury Your Bookie, and good luck
You
with
have a
everything.
great one, Dave.
The Professor, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we have a couple of baseball games on tap tonight, and the Mets will be fighting for their lives as they go against the Dodgers, who are living vicariously through a friend of mine's ticket, which is now posted internationally by the Hard Rock and the people that operate the betting site here in Florida, the only legal betting site. And they put this man's ticket up. He needs the Dodgers to win the World Series for a $100 bet to turn into 90,000, based on the other three elements of the parlay he's already brought home with championship teams. And that would put him in line with a $50 ticket to, if the Ravens could win the Super Bowl, cop for $50, $480,000. So we have a vicarious rooting interest in the Dodgers for the benefit of a good friend of mine. And we'll see if that plays out. And then Cleveland, with that dramatic victory, might have gathered a little bit of mojo. We'll see. The Yankees looked like they had suppressed any challenge that they could possibly put up and were about to take the 3-0 lead. And then, of course, Cleveland got those dramatic home runs, first in the ninth inning and then in the 10th, and now have made a series of it. Is it enough to get them back into this thing and even it up tonight? We shall see, but should be a lot of fun. And you have the WNBA. With a chance for the Liberty to win their first championship. Not that we would ever have been paying attention to that were it not for Caitlin Clark, but this became compelling as well from a gambling standpoint, as many people, if you had the links, you had to feel the dagger of that Pete Maravich shot from Ionescu, who really popped one from the Coke machine in that game for a three-pointer to provide the winning margin and cover the point spread of 2 and a hook. And so those that had the Liberty and laid the points prevailed, even though they were down 15 and looking like they were getting crushed earlier in the ballgame. So a lot of good stuff, a lot of intriguing stuff coming up over the weekend. Good luck with all of your plays. Thanks to the Professor for joining us. We hope he snaps the streak. We hope you guys make it a profitable weekend. We'll see you on Monday with the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.